I'm just waiting on hold at Rogers. Right? Yeah, that's what we're talking about today. Rogers and the relationship Rogers has to Toronto and has to the Toronto mayor. And but first, we've got to get some stuff out of the way. This is the Rogers Igniting Growth shareholder meeting PDF from 2016, April 19th, 2016. And we're going to go through kind of what this is looking at, but Rogers is mostly a family-owned company. Okay, so 90% of the shares are held by the Rogers Control Trust. And we're going to get to what the Rogers Control Trust is, but I want to go through this document a little bit before we get to that because I want everybody to be on the same page. We all have to understand what we're talking about. Okay, so who we are. Rogers Communications Inc. is a leading diversified public Canadian communications and media company. We are Canada's largest provider of wireless communication services and one of Canada's leading providers of cable television, high-speed internet, and telephony services to consumers and businesses. Through Rogers Media, we are engaged in radio and television broadcasting, television shopping, magazines and trade publications, sports entertainment, and digital media. Our stock is publicly traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange, TSX RCI.A and RCI.B, and on the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE RCI. For further information about Rogers Group of companies, please visit rogers.com, and that's their website. Okay, fair enough. So that's just who they are, and we'll get to, and that's a wide-reaching, multi-faceted company. They're very big. If you've been in Ontario for any period of time, you understand. Well, you've heard that hold music. You've sat on hold. You've cursed Rogers for having to pay for a late movie rental. Remember that? Remember when they had movie stores? Jumbo Video was my movie store. Okay. Beneficial owners, non-registered holders. So there are two classes of shares, and this is back in the article here. Quote, only registered holders of Class A shares or their proxy holders may vote at the meeting. In many cases, Class A shares are registered in the name of your representative, such as a broker, bank, trust company, or trustee, rather than in your name. So if you're a member of the Rogers Control Trust and you have Class A shares, your votes don't have your name attached to them. They're just through a broker. So that's nice. That's good. You can vote on whatever you want completely anonymously. And Rogers will just do whatever they're going to do because, they're just going to do what they're going to do. So outstanding shares and main shareholders. Okay, so this is the understanding who is in charge and making the calls for Rogers and about Rogers, because this is a big, big company, right? Okay, so on March 2nd, 2016, 112,438,692 Class A shares were outstanding. Voting control of the company is held by the Rogers Control Trust. Now, I want to show you guys the map here. This is the Rogers corporate structure. Rogers Control Trust here, everything else below it. They are the big daddies. They get the say. And they get to say anonymously, it seems, according to this anyway. They get to vote through their brokers or trustees, right? Or a representative they get to vote through. Okay, so that's where we're at. So 112 million Class A shares were outstanding, and control of the company is held by the Rogers Control Trust. The information below regarding the Rogers Control Trust and the estate arrangements of the late Ted Rogers have been provided by RCI, that's Rogers Communications, by representatives of the estate. Okay, prior to his death in 2008, Ted Rogers controlled RCI through his ownership of voting shares of a private holding company. So under his estate arrangements, the voting shares of that company and consequently voting control of RCI and its subsidiaries passed to the Rogers Control Trust. The trustee of Rogers Control Trust is the trust company subsidiary of a Canadian chartered bank, and that's Scotiabank, right? So it's National Trust Bank, Nova Scotia. So that's the trustee company, right? They're holding the money. As at March 2nd, 2016, Rogers Control Trust and private Rogers family holding companies controlled by Rogers Control Trust together own 102 million Class A shares, representing 90.292% of the outstanding Class A shares and 40 million Class B non-voting shares. Okay. So the Rogers Control Trust holds voting control of the Rogers Group of companies for the benefit of successive generations of the family of the late Ted Rogers. Okay. The equity of the private Rogers family holding company is owned by members of the Rogers family and trusts for their benefit. The governance structure of the Rogers Control Trust companies, the Control Trust chair, comprises I'll try that one again. The governance structure of the Rogers Control Trust comprises the Control Trust chair, the Control Trust vice chair, the trustee, and a committee of advisors appointed in accordance with the estate arrangements from among members of the Rogers family, individual trustees of a trust for the benefit of the Rogers family members and other individuals. That's the advisory committee. Okay, so there's a chair, and that's Edward Rogers, I believe, and we'll get to that in just a second. And there's a vice chair, and that's another Rogers child. And there are other people who are just as important within that, and they make up the advisory committee. So if you're not a chair or a vice chair, but you're on the Rogers Control Trust, you're part of the advisory committee. You get to choose who the chair and the vice chair are. Okay, that makes sense? Back to the article. The Control Trust chair acts in effect as chair executive of the Rogers Control Trust and has responsibility under the estate arrangements as representative of the controlling shareholder. The Control Trust chair's duties also include liaising with Rogers family members and the voting proxies in respect of the Class A shares held by private Rogers family holding companies. The Control Trust chair has the duty to vote the proxies on the election of directors of RCI and to approve, disapprove, or otherwise use reasonable effort to influence other matters affecting RCI. So they're the guy or girl or woman, man, who is the person who has to decide what is the direction of the Rogers company. Totally. Like not just MLSE or Rogers cell phones or any of the arms of it. Totally. Where do we want to go? So that's important to know. The Rogers Control Trust makes all those calls and they vote on it anonymously. Okay. The advisory committee. So this is this is what we're talking about now. The advisory committee is responsible for the appointment and removal of Control Trust chair and the Control Trust vice chair, with preference being given to the members of the Rogers family in accordance with the order of priority set out in the estate arrangements. So Ted Rogers is the patriarchy. If you have like 5 kids and you're like, well, I like this one better. No, I feel like this one is better at managing business, and this will be the succession because the last one's not really interested in business. They're more interested in, something else that rich kids are interested in. Pokemon, right? Who knows? So the succession laid out by Ted Rogers. That guy was the person who owned all this, and I mean, he's dead, but he had a right to lay it out however he wanted, and this is how he laid it out. Okay. So the succession of the chairs is in the estate. Okay, the approval on behalf of the Rogers Control Trust of certain significant transactions affecting RCI, including any transaction that would result in a change of control of RCI or any of its material subsidies or the sale of any of them or substantially all of its assets, or the acquisition by any of them of significant assets. There are other conditions as well. You can read it yourself. The link will be in the description. But essentially anything big, like, hey, we're going to go buy the Maple Leafs. Okay, well, we have to ask the Control Trust if we're going to do that. Okay, we'll go ask the Control Trust. Okay, so they go do that. And then the Control Trust gets to vote on it, again, anonymously, right? So say this document. And again, if I'm wrong, please do let me know. I'm reading this and interpreting it. So if I get something wrong, sometimes I do, and that happens. So sorry if I do, but the way I'm reading this and interpreting this, they get to send their vote through a proxy based on everything, right? So there you go. The current members of the advisory committee are Loretta Rogers, Lisa Rogers, Edward Rogers, Melinda Rogers, Martha Rogers, David Rogers, Alan Horn, Thomas Hull, and John H. Tory. And there's one more, Philip B. Lind. Oh, 2 more, Philip B. Lind and Peter Godso. Okay, but John H. Tory is the interesting one. John H. Tory has been and is currently the mayor of Toronto. So he's got voting control of Rogers Incorporated, of Rogers. He's got a lot of sway. That's something voters should probably be aware of. So there's a lot of, the Rogers family is all over Toronto, and there's lots and lots of talk about them. Here's an article from the Globe and Mail from 2017, from 2015. Well, the article's from 2017, but the picture's from 2015, sorry. And talking about how Ted Rogers' adult children are moving into senior roles, but no mention of Tory. I wanted to show you guys what Rogers' assets are, what their list of holdings are, because I looked at it and I was like, man, this is a huge company. So, media. This is the Wikipedia page for a list of assets owned by Rogers Communications. So Wikipedia is as legitimate as Wikipedia is, so please source it. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's the best Wikipedia's got right now, so here we go. But they own, according to Wikipedia, City TV in Calgary, Edmonton, Montreal, Regina, Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg. They own Omni in Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, and Vancouver. They own Specialty TV. They own 41% of CPAC, so that's kind of fun. Go ahead, guys. Talk about what you like, up to a point. FXX, Shopping Channel. The Shopping Channel? I didn't know that. WWE Network, and many more. So this is a very Sportsnet. I mean, they're heavily invested in sports. And we can go down here and see these are magazines. The red ones are defunct. And they own Toronto Maple Leafs, the Toronto Raptors, Toronto FC, the Toronto Argonauts, the Toronto Marlies, the Raptors 905, the Toronto FC 2, and the TFC Academy. And they own a couple of stadiums as well. So this is not a small company. And John Tory is one of a very small group of people who has voting control of this company. Not just, not just voting rights. He's pretty up there, There isn't anybody above him and what they tell the bank. I mean, the chair. So there's the chair. John Tory talks to the chair. They all make their votes anonymously. But is it appropriate for the mayor of Toronto to have that position? Is it appropriate for the mayor of Toronto, who also controls a company who owns City TV, Omni Television, and a bunch of radio stations in and around the Toronto area, is that appropriate to not be widely known and widely reported on? Is it appropriate for that same candidate to blacklist another candidate based on speech that candidate deems hateful or inappropriate? Rogers Communication has a really, really highly placed political asset in Mayor Tory. And I'm not sure that people know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know how deep this goes, nor how narrow and small the voting group of people for the Rogers company are. There's like less than 10. And they all get in a room and say, yeah, does Rogers want to get more powerful? Mr. Tory has used his mayor position in the past to lobby the government. He wrote a letter to Justin Trudeau's cabinet to say they should overturn the CRTC's position that the internet companies, the major internet companies, but he was only specifically talking about Bell, allow their higher speed internet rates to be resold by smaller internet companies like TechSavvy or other small internet companies. So he's acting outside of his official capacity while claiming that he's being totally above board. I didn't do anything wrong, guys. And you can see the letter in, I did another video about it the other day, and you can see that there. But is all of this appropriate? Is it okay to say, you third polling mayoral candidate, you are racist and terrible, and I own all of these media stations and nobody is going to broadcast you. Ha 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 ha, you white supremacist racist. Well, maybe, but maybe if the mayor of Toronto didn't own or have a very, very influential position within the Rogers corporate structure, maybe the news would be a little bit more even. Maybe, maybe not. I could be wrong. But hey, here's Rogers Bank, everybody. Make sure that if you put your money in there, you send a little message to Mayor Tory and let him know that you trust him with your money, your television, your internet, your entertainment, and running your city. And you trust him to not have any corporate backroom deals at all, totally above board. Hey, let's all put our money into Rogers Bank. Check out faithfortoronto.ca. Check out the People's Party of Canada.ca. Is this appropriate, guys? Is this totally okay and I'm just overreacting? Who knows?